Emily will be cooking some Mediterranean themed recipes for you guys. And I hope that you have received the recipe packet that includes all the recipes for tonight. Dakota and Rachel will also be including a link to the PDF of the recipes in the chat box. You can go ahead and click on the link if you don't have those recipes in handy. And it would also be nice if you guys text in the chat box and let me know if you're cooking along or if you're just watching, and we'll do the recipes later on your own, just to get, you know, a count of how many people are cooking along, so we kind of like slow down a little and make sure everybody's following along when we start cooking. In the meantime, I will go ahead and shift the introduction to Jessie. She can go ahead and introduce herself, and Emily will do so next.
Hi, I'm Jessie. I am a dietetic student, and I am completing my first round of rotations at the Kendall Reagan Nutrition Center, and I'm going to be showing you how to make tiramisu.
Hi everyone, my name is Emily. I am also a dietetic intern with the Kendall Reagan Nutrition Center. I just graduated from CSU in May with my master's in nutrition, so CSU grad here, and I'll be making a classic Italian salad with homemade vinaigrette. Back over to you, Nancy.
Awesome, thanks Jessie, and thank you, Emily. So I'm just gonna give you guys a quick rundown of the recipes that we're having today, and they're also gonna be in the order that we will do them. So the first thing that we are gonna be starting with is gonna be a whole wheat pizza dough, and then we'll shift to 5-minute tomato sauce, and then we will shift to the back to the whole wheat pizza dough, and then we'll shift to a tiramisu, and then we'll come back and finish our pizza, and then finally we will have our salad. With that being said, I will go ahead and just do some safety talk, just, you know, like how to basically safely hold a knife, and just other food safety instructions, like having your hair tied back, wearing closed-toe shoes. So starting like with a knife, you just want to make sure that you hold the knife in this way where you have your index and your thumb holding the blade of the knife. This is the most stable way and sturdy enough so you wouldn't like it wouldn't get wobbly or bubbly when you're cutting vegetables or cutting anything. And then with the other hand, when you're holding the item that you're cutting, you want to make sure it's in a bear claw position, and it's not like you have your fingers straight, so you wouldn't accidentally cut the fingers. So it would look something like that. And you always want to cut away from your body. And with that said, we have about 37 participants. We'll just go ahead and get started, and then others hopefully will join soon. So the first recipe that we will get started on is going to be the whole wheat pizza dough. So what we'll do is that we're going to have like a large bowl like this. And we are going to mix water, yeast, and sugar. So the water that we want to have should be warm, because the yeast likes the warm water to get activated. We want to make sure that it's not too hot, so we wouldn't kill the yeast. So it should be about 110 degrees Fahrenheit. So I'm going to go ahead and fill some water from the tap, from the hot water tap. I'm just going to warm a little bit, and then I'm going to put the measuring cup in there and measure about half a cup of warm water. All right, that's about half a cup here. And then I'm going to put it in the bowl. And then we are going to mix that with 1.5 teaspoons of active dry yeast. And that's about 1 packet. And then to give the yeast some food, we are going to add some sugar, which is also about 1.5 teaspoons of granulated sugar. And I'm going to give that a quick mix with a whisk, or even just a spatula, whatever you have in hand. Make sure there aren't any clumps in there. And then I'm just gonna cover that with a towel, and then I'm gonna let it sit for 10 minutes. Alrighty, and then we're gonna move on to the 5-minute tomato sauce. So our recipes tonight are all from scratch, whether it's the pizza dough or obviously the tomato sauce, which we're about to get started on, the salad, and then we are going to use that pizza dough that we will be making along with the tomato sauce to assemble our pizza. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started on the tomato sauce. And this is such an easy recipe because it takes like less than 5 minutes or even 5 minutes to get it done. So over here, I have a cold saucepan, and then I have about a teaspoon of olive oil in here. I'm gonna turn the heat up to medium high. And then I'm gonna add some red pepper flakes, about a 1/4 teaspoon crushed red pepper flakes, and 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt, which is about a pinch of salt. I'm gonna put it here. And you wanna make sure that your saucepan is cold. It doesn't have to be hot or like at least warm. It's okay if you just use a cold saucepan. And then we are also gonna chop the garlic. So using that bear claw fist position I showed earlier, I'm gonna be chopping my garlic. So first what I wanna do is I want to smash the garlic so it's easier to mince. So using the thickest part of your knife blade, you're gonna place that on the garlic, and then using the back of your hand, you're going to crush the garlic like so. And then if that has the outer layer on it, automatically it will come off when you smash the garlic, but I already peeled mine so it doesn't have that outer peel or layer on it. So I'm just gonna go ahead and mince my garlic. Depending on how thick you want it, I mean, obviously if it's on the thicker side, you're gonna feel it when you're eating the sauce, when it's on the pizza. So just depending on whether you want to feel it or not when you're eating, just mince it according to that size. So mine is like fairly small. So I'm gonna go ahead and add that to the saucepan. So again, we have the olive oil, we have the red pepper flakes, we have the salt. I kind of mixed my red pepper flakes earlier in the same container as my pepper flakes. So they're all in the saucepan right now, and the garlic is in there. And then we are just gonna stir while the saucepan heats over medium-high heat for about a minute. We are not trying to brown the garlic. We are just trying to get a little bit of a fragment. So it shouldn't be more than a minute. I see we're getting a little bit more people. That's awesome. So it's starting to sizzle here, which means it's starting to get a little bit hot. And I'm also starting to smell some fragments of the garlic with the olive oil. It smells really good. And so the next steps here is to put in the tomatoes that we have, which for this recipe, we are using crushed tomatoes. And it's about 1 cup of the crushed tomatoes. So I'm gonna go in with the crushed tomatoes. And I've always wondered what is the difference between the crushed tomatoes and the diced tomatoes. So the diced tomatoes are chunks of tomato in tomato juice. And they usually contain citric acid and calcium chloride, which helps the tomato chunks retain their shape. Because the diced tomatoes stay firmer even when cooking, they are great for long simmering dishes. And in this case, in our recipe, we are not doing a long simmer dish. So we are using the crushed tomatoes, which are on the other hand, a mixture of a much more finely diced tomatoes. And they are in a tomato puree. They have a much finer texture. And the thickness is ideal for pasta sauce, which we're technically making a tomato sauce, which is close enough to a pasta sauce. The diced tomatoes, however, can be used instead of the crushed tomatoes. However, you would want to elongate or make the cooking time a little bit longer for your sauce or whatever you're doing, because it's going to take like a longer time for those diced tomatoes to cook than the crushed tomatoes. You could also place your diced tomatoes in a food processor for a little bit so that they get that finer texture and become a little bit more liquid, just like the texture of crushed tomatoes. So over here for my sauce, it's getting a little hot, it's boiling. It's technically ready to be used. So I'm just gonna give it a little bit of a taste to see how the spices are tasting in there and decide if I wanna add more seasoning. It tastes really good to me. I don't think I need to add any more salt, but it's obviously a personal preference. If you feel like you wanna add more seasonings, please go ahead. And you could also use any other seasonings you like black pepper, paprika, whatever you'd like to have in your tomato sauce. Also, an optional ingredient for the recipe today is lemon zest. So I zested about a teaspoon of lemon over here. And then I'm just gonna go ahead and add that over in my saucepan. If you don't like the taste of lemon zest, you can totally not use it in this recipe. It's completely optional, or you could just use it for garnish when you serve the tomato sauce. So for the time being, my tomato sauce is ready. So I'm gonna turn it down to low heat and I'm just gonna let it simmer because I want it to be hot by the time we get to assemble the pizza. So again, I'm just turning the heat down to low, the lowest I have, and then I'm just gonna let it simmer. In the meantime, I also have some facts for you, fun facts, I guess, about the difference between tomato puree and tomato paste. For me, both of these are actually confusing, but the tomato puree is made by lightly cooking tomatoes and then pureeing the softened product into a liquid, while the tomato paste is cooked for longer. And the cooked tomatoes are strained to remove the seeds and the skins before being cooked again to reduce the concentrate into a thick paste. So technically the tomato paste has a thicker texture than the tomato puree. I mean, this was a fairly simple 5-minute tomato sauce, but you could also add other ingredients to the tomato sauce. You can add tomato puree or tomato paste. However, the cooking instructions would vary. But I really like this recipe for the tomato sauce because just like I said, it's a 5-minute, really quick recipe. It's super easy, not many ingredients are needed, and it's really delicious as well. So I'm gonna go back to our whole wheat pizza dough recipe, but first I'm just gonna do a little bit of a cleanup here. And then I just figured that I have not switched to my better view. So I'm gonna go ahead and change my camera view real quick. I guess that's better for everybody so you guys can see clearly. And also I forgot to mention in the beginning of the class, if you have any questions, please ask in the chat box and somebody will read it out loud for me and I can answer your questions. Okay, cool. Does anybody have questions so far? I haven't been able to read the chat box. I'm guessing that's a no.
Nothing so far. I'll let you know
Okay.
if anything comes in.
Cool. And did we get like a count or like an estimate of how many people are cooking along with us? Because I can't read the chat box, so I don't know.
Let me scroll through and see. There's definitely a few cooking along for sure.
Awesome. Okay. So for those of you who are cooking along, if I'm going too fast, just please let me know in the chat box and I'll slow down. So I'm just gonna go ahead and transition back to the whole wheat pizza dough. I think it's been about like 6 or 7 minutes since we let our dry active yeast sit in that mixture. So what we're basically looking for is a little bit of a rice in that mixture, and I see it over here. It's definitely activated.
I'm going to interrupt really quick. We have about 5 to 6 cooking along that we know of.
All right, awesome. Well, you guys, again, if you're running behind, just let me know. Okay. So our next steps is that we are going to add the honey, the salt, and a tablespoon of the olive oil. So our recipe here calls for a tablespoon of honey. So I'm going to go ahead and add the honey. And then I'm going to add the salt, which is about ½ teaspoon of salt. Give it a little mix. And then we only need a tablespoon of olive oil. Just make sure that you only add the tablespoon because this recipe calls for 1½ tablespoons, but for this step, we're only using 1 tablespoon. So I'm just going to scoop out 1 tablespoon, add it to the mixture. Okay. So after we have added all of our liquid ingredients to the mixture, I'm going to go ahead and start adding the flour. And we're going to be adding it in about a 1/4 cup increments. So I'm going to eyeball it. I'm using 1 cup whole wheat flour and using ½ cup white flour and a little bit more, about 1 tablespoon for dusting. However, I don't think we'll need to use the whole tablespoon. So I'm just adding a little bit at a time. Just mixing them. So yeast is a single-celled microorganism related to mushrooms. There are several species that exist. However, in the kitchen, we mostly use just one species, and it's known as the sugar-eating fungi. It's basically used to make bread rice. It's available in various forms, which differ mostly by the moisture content. And for this dough recipe, we were actually using the active dry yeast, which is partially dehydrated and formed into granules. It contains the dormant yeast cells that heat at room temperature for several months. And how we activate it is basically by rehydrating it, and that's what we did when we added the warm water. And also some sugar for the yeast to feed on. And then the results will be the foam that I don't know if you guys saw when I was trying to tilt the bowl, but that means that the yeast is active. There are also other types of yeast, including cake yeast, which is also known as fresh yeast or compressed yeast. And there's also instant yeast, which is known as quick rise yeast. So again, I'm just adding my flour here in like about 1/4 cup increments. It just makes it easier to blend everything together or combine everything together. And since my dough is starting to form, I'm actually gonna switch to a spatula because it's gonna be easier to mix with that instead of a whisk. I'm just gonna get the dough out of here. And I'm gonna go get a spatula. This is what I have so far, forming into a little ball, but I still have about half of the amount of the flour, so I'm just gonna keep adding all of it. And again, that's 1 cup whole wheat flour and half a cup of the white flour. You could also use your hands for that step. You don't have to use a spatula. I just find it easier because the dough at this point is really sticky and it's just going to keep sticking to my fingers. So I just like using the spatula until it's a little less sticky, and then I'll use my hands. All right, I'm going to add the remaining of the white flour here. And I just had my flours separated in 2 different cups. You could obviously just mix them together and add them. You don't have to separate them just like I did. This is what I have so far, and I'm going to continue kneading because obviously I still have some loose flour at the bottom of the bowl.
Nancy, we have a question about the purpose of sifting flour and what it does to the dough.
The purpose of what?
Sifting?
Sifting flour?
Yes.
So the purpose of sifting flour, I think it's just because you don't want to have lumps, especially when you're making like a liquid mixture, like let's say for pancakes or waffles or crepes, you don't want to have those lumps in your liquid mixture. So that's why you sift the flour. But since we're just making a dough here, I don't think it's an issue if you have the lumps because you're mixing it regardless. If any of the other instructors want to chime in and put some input, if they have something more to say.
No, I agree with you, Nancy. I think you covered it.
Cool, awesome. So I started using my hands because it was getting a little bit harder with the spatula because I had so much of the loose flour at the bottom of the bowl, and at this point it's just easier to use my hands to get that loose flour to stick to the actual dough. That's what it looks like right now. So I have about 1/4 cup left, so I'm going to add that in here. So we are going to keep kneading with hand, or if you actually have like a hook, a dough hook, you could use that. It's obviously going to make it easier for you. But I like to use my hands. So we're just going to keep kneading until the dough is smooth, soft, and slightly sticky. And then once we achieve that texture, we are going to knead for additional 5 minutes. So we have a little bit more kneading to do here.
I have another question for you.
Awesome.
Is it possible to use a food processor for this or a mixer with a dough hook?
Yeah, I don't think a food processor would be a good idea for this because it will probably just liquefy the whole thing. And I honestly do not know. I have never done it before, but from what I can picture, I don't think it's a good idea. However, for the dough hook, yes, that's definitely a great thing to do. It's going to be faster for you to form that dough and it's definitely less of an effort compared to using your hands. I might need to use a little bit more of water here because my dough is really dry and it's not coming together anymore. Again, that's possible and bound to happen. So just use, common sense when you're kneading your dough. If you need to like add more water or more flour. So I'm just gonna add about like a teaspoon, and then we'll go from there. So I don't want to add too much water, then I'll have to add more flour, and then it's a cycle. Almost like a never-ending cycle. So that's a teaspoon of water, and then let's see if it comes together. Okay, it's coming together, so that's good. We are almost there, you guys, whoever is cooking along. So I'm just gonna knead for additional 5 minutes. And then I could just flour the surface slightly with some of the flour. Are there any questions coming through?
No questions yet.
Cool, thank you. So I'm just kneading it until it sticks all together. Ooh, it's a workout. I'm not really happy with how my dough looks. It's just a little too dry. So I'm just gonna add another half teaspoon of water and see if it sticks a little better. Because you don't want the dough to be too dry. You want it to be a little bit sticky. So right now I think that looks much better and feels much better over here. It's a little sticky, it's softer. It's exactly what we want. So I'm gonna knead for like an additional minute here, and then I think we're good to let it proof. Yep, it's definitely much better, super, super soft. All right, I'm happy with my dough. So before I place it back into the bowl, With the remaining olive oil that we have, which should be about half tablespoon, I'm just gonna get it in my hand a little bit, rub it on my palms, and then I'm just gonna rub the dough with it so like it doesn't stick. And then I'm gonna place it back in that bowl. Put a little bit more on it. And then we are going to cover it with a towel, and we are going to let it rest for 20 minutes in a warm place. I'm just gonna let it sit right here. I think it's warm enough where I am. And I'm going to go ahead and preheat the oven to 450 degrees. I know in the recipe here it says 475, but we're doing 450 for the pizza recipe. And then we are gonna come back to finish this pizza after 20 minutes. For now, Jessie will take over to make the tiramisu.
All right, everybody, we're gonna switch gears and make our dessert here because it has to set in the fridge for 1 to 3 hours. So, first I'm gonna get my espresso. I'm gonna measure out 1 teaspoon and put it in a mixing bowl. If you don't particularly like the taste of espresso, you can use any type of instant ground coffee and then just make it as the instructions on the package say. And then I have a half cup of room temperature water here. Just gonna pour that in and mix it up. So tiramisu originated in Italy, and they are big fans of espresso there. So that is the type of coffee traditionally used in this recipe. And the word tiramisu is an Italian word that translates to pick-me-up. All right. So now I'm gonna mix my whipping cream with sugar and vanilla extract. So I'm gonna take a 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla and put it in a tall mixing bowl. We're not working with a whole lot of liquid here, so a tall bowl with a smaller center is gonna be better than compared to a shallow bowl that's really wide. It's gonna be better for mixing. And I've got my half cup of heavy whipping cream. I'm gonna pour that in. And 1 tablespoon of sugar. Now I'm gonna mix this for about 2.5 minutes. On low. Once again, it's a really small amount of liquid, so just kind of tilt the bowl as you need to. You want it to kind of thicken up. Traditionally, I would be mixing mascarpone cheese and raw egg yolks in this recipe, but there are so many variations that will give you a similar rich flavor. You can also try using powdered sugar in place of sugar. It's going to mix up really well also if you have that on hand. We want this to be thick enough that we can layer it on our lady fingers and it'll stay in place.
Jessie, we have a question from a participant. And they are asking, is everything supposed to be in the same bowl?
Not yet. Right now in this bowl, I only have the whipping cream, the sugar, and the vanilla extract.
And so the cocoa is not in there already?
Correct. We're gonna do that at the very last step.
Yes, the cocoa is almost like for garnish. Thanks, Jessie.
Yeah, no problem. I've only got a little bit left to mix. Then we'll be ready to pour.
All right, thank you, Rachel. I just got your text. It's okay, Jess. Jesse, you can keep mixing. It's just some people are asking for us to slow down a little.
Okay, I think that's good. So that was really loud. Was that comment for me? Didn't hear anything.
Oh no, you're good.
Okay.
I think there is one comment from a participant asking about kneading. So let me just address it really quick. So the question is there concern for over kneading in this recipe? I have made bread before and over kneading changes the taste and how it cooks. So I don't think there's a concern for over kneading. Again, just the consistency that you're trying to reach with your dough is that it's nice and smooth and a little bit sticky. So once you get to that consistency, or texture, I would just stop there to prevent over kneading. But yeah, I think that's it.
All right. So now we're gonna pour our espresso coffee into a shallow bowl for dipping. And the recipe calls for 9 of these ladyfinger cookies. And you want to dip them pretty quickly so they don't get too soggy and fall apart. Also, if you leave them in there too long, you're going to run out of coffee before you get through all 9. So I'm just going to dip them quickly and then put them in this serving pan that I'm using. Just kind of a dip, flip, and put it in the bowl. I'm not sure if there's a specific way to layer these, but I figure I'm gonna do 4 on bottom. We're gonna do a layer of our whip. And then I'm gonna put a few more on top of that, a few more cookies on top. And we're gonna save our cocoa powder for last. So here's my first layer, and I'll show you guys what it looks like in a second. A rubber spatula works well for this. So layer 1, voila. And then we're gonna keep going. We got 5 more cookies.
Sorry, Jessie, there's a question. I'm just going to address it. Yes, Donna, we did send out the recipes. And if you scroll up a little bit in the chat, well, Rachel just did send it again. So that link should take you to the PDF, which contains the recipe packet. And also we send out a grocery and prep list for you, which contains all the ingredients that you will need already pre-measured for you. And those ingredients should be enough for the whole recipes in the recipe packet to be serving 4 servings of each recipe. And it also has a list of the utensils that you will need throughout the cooking class. So I would highly recommend referring to that in preparation for the cooking class. I hope that answers your question.
Now I'm putting my second layer of the whip mixture on here.
Jessie, there's a question for you. Where do you find lady fingers? I haven't seen them in the store before.
You know, I had never seen them either. I found them in the the cookie aisle, like on the top shelf. So So somewhere in the cookie aisle, any major grocery chain should have them.
Yeah, and I'll add to that too. When I went shopping for them, I couldn't find them in the cookie aisle, to be honest. So I did find them in the bakery section. So I just went ahead to the bakery section and I asked for the ladyfingers, and they were actually fresh. They were with the angel food cakes. So that's where I got mine. But like Jesse said, it's also in the cookies section.
Very nice. Fresh ones would be good to try.
Yeah, they were really soft. Another question for you. How many cookies do we put in?
9. We're using 9 today. And that's going to be 4 servings.
Thank you.
So here I'm just going to add all the rest of this mixture on top. Mine's kind of like a pyramid. Traditionally, it's like a square, but you know, whatever floats your boat tonight, we're going to make it work. And sometimes you can even put fruit in between these layers, which I think would be really yummy to try. And this delicious no-bake dessert is usually reserved for special occasions. So we're treating ourselves tonight. And the last thing I'm gonna do is sprinkle this cocoa on top and then let it set in the fridge for 1 to 3 hours. Oh, and this is how much cocoa? It says 1 to 2 teaspoons. This is a little bit over 1. I think it's plenty. If you love cocoa powder, then do it up. All right, here is our almost finished product. Now I'm gonna set it in the fridge and turn it over to, I believe Emily is up next.
Thanks, Jesse. And just like Jesse said, the tiramisu should be in the fridge for at least 1 hour, and you know, between 1 to 3 hours. Obviously, over 3 hours should be fine as well. But just give it at least an hour in the fridge before you eat it. And I believe that I am next, so I am back. So I'm gonna turn on my camera. Thanks, Jesse. So I don't know, let me share my screen one more time. All right, cool. Hope you guys can see me. Real quick. Okay, so we actually have about 9 more minutes left until the dough is ready to go. So we are just going to use that time to give the participants who are cooking along some time to catch up and also answer any questions that you guys might have at this point. Otherwise, we will be back in like about 7 to 8 more minutes, and we will roll out our pizza dough, and we will get our pizza assembled, and we will throw it in the oven. And then after that, we will shift gears to making the salad. So feel free to like ask any questions right now. Or if you're cooking along, just let us know how you're doing and where you're at in the process. I'm just gonna go ahead and stop sharing because I don't know why I'm sharing. Thanks, Rachel. Nice, Jennifer. Thanks for the update. It's good to hear that everybody is on the same page, or at least one participant is on the same page. Yep. Thanks, Darcy. It's about how long I have as well, about 7 minutes. So I actually do have my tomato sauce still on low. It's simmering, so it's hot by the time I put it on the pizza, which should be very shortly. But just make sure that you stir it occasionally so it doesn't stick to the bottom of the saucepan, which it shouldn't. But just in case, we don't want to burn it. We don't want to have it stuck to the bottom of the saucepan. Smells really good. I have a question that says, are there any carbs in this? Are you talking about which recipe, or are you talking about the whole cooking class? The sauce? So yes, actually there are carbs in the sauce. Let me grab the recipe really quick. So actually it's a really good thing because we have a nutrition analysis with all of our recipes at the bottom of the recipe. And they are very accurate. We do them based on the amounts of each ingredient used. So I would highly refer to these if you have any questions about nutrients in the specific recipe. But relating to the tomato sauce, in terms of carbohydrates, there are about 20 grams. There is none added sugars though, so there is no added sugar in there. However, there are 11 grams of the sugar. There is 5 grams dietary fiber as well. Hope that answers your question. We have 2 questions in the Q&A. Cool. Jesse, do you mind answering the question by Margit?
Yeah, give me just a second to look that up. I'm not sure.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I hadn't made it that way yet, so let me check on that for you.
Sounds good. Yeah, I personally am not sure if we can do that. So Jesse will check in. We'll come back with a response shortly. And we have a really good question. How does the ratio of all-purpose flour to wheat flour affect the dough? I don't want to speak out of guesses, but my guess on that question would be that the whole wheat flour would require more water. But let me actually check on that and get back to you. And if any of the other instructors is familiar with the ratio of flours to water or how that would change if you use like more of either, you can chime in and let us know.
I can chime in and take a stab at it. So more all-purpose flour compared to whole wheat flour is going to make the crust a little bit fluffier. You know, you think of white bread being fluffier, softer, and then compared to whole wheat bread, which is typically a little bit more dense because the whole grain is there in the whole wheat bread. So if you want a lighter, fluffier crust, I would use more all-purpose flour. But if you want to incorporate some whole grains, you can increase the ratio of whole wheat flour to all-purpose. So it'll just kind of affect the density of the dough a little bit. They do make something called white whole wheat flour or whole wheat pastry flour, which has all the same benefits of whole wheat. It is whole wheat flour. It's just milled a little bit finer, so it kind of gives the texture of all-purpose flour, but you get the benefits of having the whole grain flour there. I hope that helps. I'm not sure about how much water you'll have to use though, but I would guess probably a little bit more.
Thanks, Emily. Yeah, I also guessed it would be something with the water, but thanks for the other really helpful information as well. Great questions, guys.
Yeah, really great questions. So I found that you would not use mascarpone cheese in place of the heavy whipping cream. it's actually going to be used in combination. So if you want to omit the eggs, that's why you add the whipping cream. I couldn't tell you how much though. The recipe I found was on a different scale than ours.
Thanks, Jesse. All right, we should have about a minute left for the proofing of the dough, and then we'll be ready to start rolling it out. Okay, I'm gonna quickly just give the tomato sauce a quick stir, and then I'm gonna get my dough. And my oven is almost there to 450 degrees. Right now it's at 420. So we should be ready, quite soon. So my dough has definitely risen a little. I can't say it doubled in size because we haven't let it rest just long enough to double in size, but it definitely did rise and get a little bigger. So it's good to go. So I'm gonna lightly flour the surface where I'm about to roll the dough. Let me share my screen really quick. So again, for the additional flour, I just put like 1 tablespoon, but I really doubt that I'll be using all that. I would actually go with like maybe half a tablespoon or just 1 teaspoon and then build it out from there if more is needed. So I'm just gonna lightly flour the surface. And then we are going to roll this dough out into a 1/4 inch thick and 12 inches wide pizza crust. I'm not really good with measurements, so I'm gonna eyeball it and hopefully it's gonna fit into the pan that I have over here, or the pizza, pan, I guess, which is about 12 inches. So what I like to do, I like to start from the center and really just push it outwards in each direction a little bit. That kind of stretches the center outwards without necessarily like stretching the edges of the pizza crust or the dough. Okay, that's my oven. It's ready. It's at 450 degrees right now. I'm gonna try to make it as circular as possible. And I have more information for you, actually some cool facts. The difference between extra virgin olive oil and olive oil. So the olive oil is going to be lighter in color. It's almost like pale yellow. And it's going to cost less than the extra virgin olive oil. It's a blend of cold pressed olive oil and olive oil that has been refined to remove any natural impurities in the oil. And in order to do this, the oil has been treated either chemically or with heat. And the resulting oil is lighter in color, just like I mentioned, almost neutral in the flavor, and it withstands high temperature, higher than the extra virgin olive oil. While on the other hand, the extra virgin olive oil, it has not been exposed to any chemicals or heat treatment, meaning the oil has been cold pressed from the fruit, which resulted in more flavor, and it's darker in color. And since the oil has not been refined, it has a lower smoking point, which it burns the oil faster and requires more caution when cooking so you don't burn the oil and give your food unpleasant taste. Think that my dough is about 12 inches wide. I think it looks good. Maybe I'll roll it out a little bit more. So if you're wondering which one to buy or which one to use, olive oil is safer when cooking with because of the higher smoking or smoke point and the neutral flavor. And the extra virgin olive oil is ideal for a flavorful dressing, a dip for bread, stuff like that. However, you got to be careful when you're cooking with it so you don't burn it and get that unpleasant taste in your food. But again, it's totally up to you. It's totally personal preference. Given the information that I just provided, you could use either, whichever you prefer. So I think my pizza crust looks good. So what I'm gonna do next is that I'm gonna get that pizza pan and then I'm going to lightly brush it or dust it with either cornmeal or olive oil, which I'm just gonna use olive oil.
And we have a question that just came in the chat. Should anything be in the oven right now? Is there anything in the oven?
No, it should just be preheating. So it should be at 450 degrees right now.
And then would you advise using a pizza stone?
Yeah, sure. If you have that in handy, for sure, go for it. So I'm gonna go ahead and put my dough in here, or my pizza crust is not dough anymore. It's slightly big, but it looks good. And then I'm gonna brush it with the olive oil that we have, which is about ½ teaspoon extra virgin olive oil. And this really just adds to the flavor at the end when it's fully cooked. All right. So now what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna use my fingers and then I'm gonna make some dents in the pizza to avoid like bubbles or like stuff like that when it goes in the oven. So I'm not really following a pattern. I'm just randomly forming these dents in the pizza crust. So it should look like something like that. And then what I'm gonna do next is get my tomato sauce, which we made together from scratch. And then I am going to spread it. So notice everything we make here so far is from scratch in terms of the pizza. It's super easy. So you don't have to like buy the, like the canned or the ones that are prepackaged, sort of like tomato sauces. You saw how easy it is, and it's obviously, it contains less sodium, it contains less sugars. So it's definitely a better option. And it's, again, fairly quick to do. So I'm just spreading my tomato sauce all over as evenly as possible. And then what I'm gonna do next is that I'm gonna add my toppings. Just give me a moment, I'm gonna grab them from the other side. So I have ½ cup olives. I have ½ cup or 4 ounces mozzarella cheese. I have ½ cup or 4 ounces of feta cheese. I have 1 cup sun-dried tomatoes. And I have 1 cup of the artichoke hearts. Alrighty, so I'm gonna start with the olives, and they don't have that pit inside. Just gonna randomly put them on there, but I'm gonna try to make them as dispersed away from each other as possible. And I'm gonna turn on my stove because I forgot I left it on. And then I'm gonna add the artichoke hearts. And then obviously feel free to use whatever ingredients or toppings that you want to add on top of your pizza. You can add like bacon, sausage. You can even eliminate any of these ingredients and add other vegetables that you want. You can add broccoli, you can add potatoes. However, for like meats, if you choose to add meats, I would make sure that the meats are fully cooked before they go in the oven, because the pizza only goes in there for like 15 minutes. So it's not enough time to cook meat if you choose to add like chicken or bacon or sausage. So just make sure it's pre-cooked before you put it in there. Fully cooked. And then I'm gonna add the sun-dried tomatoes. And then I'm gonna top with the cheese. So I'm gonna start with the feta cheese. And then finally, topping with the mozzarella cheese. This looks so good, guys. Like, I'm really hungry right now. All right, and that should be it for the pizza. We just made it from scratch, guys. That's amazing. Super easy, super fast, except for the dough proofing, obviously. Other than that, super quick. So I'm just gonna put it in the oven for about 15 minutes. You can put it from 15 to 20 minutes, depending on how fast the dough becomes browned, obviously, and the cheese is bubbling. But the minimum is 15 minutes for this pizza crust. And then we are going to remove it before the end of class today. So it should be ready before we leave, ready to eat. The only thing that's not gonna be ready is the tiramisu. And again, remember that it goes in the fridge from 1 to 3 hours. And then now I'm gonna shift to Emily for her to make, show us the salad.
Hello, everyone. Oh, there I am. So you probably won't be able to see my face, which is fine, but I'll show you all the ingredients, which are even better. So we are going to make a classic Italian salad with homemade vinaigrette. And just like we made the pizza completely from scratch, we're actually going to make the salad dressing from scratch, which is easier than you think. You can control the ingredients that are used, and you can add different spices for different flavor profiles. For this dressing, we're obviously going to do a more Mediterranean style vinaigrette. So I have a little jar right here. You can use any jar or container that has a tight fitting lid, because we're going to shake the dressing in here and we don't want it to make a mess. So I have my salad dressing ingredients. I have 1/4 cup of olive oil. I have 1/4 cup red wine vinegar. Balsamic vinegar would also work really well in this dressing. I've got all kinds of spices in here. So salt, black pepper, basil, oregano, they all kind of blend together. So I can't remember the individual spices in here, but I know basil and oregano. Let me double check. Parsley, basil, and oregano, salt, and pepper. So I'm going to throw the spices in there. And I've got 2 teaspoons of Parmesan. Feta would also be incredible in here. I've got a teaspoon of lemon juice, so I'm just going to do a little wedge. Make sure the seeds have been pulled out so I don't get any seeds in the dressing. The honey, we got a teaspoon of honey that was in the vinegar. So we've already taken care of that. So we've got olive oil, vinegar, honey, lemon juice, Parmesan, and then all of our spices. So we've got everything in there. I'm gonna put the lid on. Make sure it's really tight because I don't want to get it all over my laptop. And we're just going to shake it until everything is blended. And it'll naturally separate if you keep this in the fridge for a couple days. The oil and the vinegar will naturally separate. That's okay. You just want to shake it up a little bit before you use it. So that's good for now. So we've got it all blended up. I'm going to put that aside. And we're going to get started on the salad ingredients. So we are going to start with slicing our red onion. So here's our red onion as an example. This is the stem end. Got this kind of long dried bit. And then this is the root end. Now the best way to cut an onion without having to cry all the time, we want to keep this root end on. That's going to help release less of the compounds that make us cry. So what we're going to do is cut the stem off, peel it off a little bit, cut the stem off, and then you cut it in half this way. And then you get a piece that looks like this. So we keep the root on, the stem is off. And then all we're going to do is cut thin slices into the onion. Let's see if you can see it better like this. Cut thin slices of the onion while keeping the root on. So you're not going to go all the way up. So we're just going to slice without going all the way up to the root. Keeping that claw form on the hand. Protect your fingers. And I'm going to do that around the entire half of the onion. Gets a little tricky when we get to this edge. And then we've got all of these slices with the root attached. Then we're just going to cut the root off. And then now we have our sliced onion. If you wanted to chop onion for any other recipe, then you would just go ahead and chop it and then discard the root. So we're going to get rid of that. Put it right there. Now that we've got our red onion sliced, we are going to thinly slice this cucumber. So I've got a chunk here. I've got some cucumber right here, already thinly sliced. So to make it easier, I've got both ends cut off. So we have a flat surface to put down on the cutting board. Anytime you're cutting vegetable, fruit, whatever it is, try to create a flat surface for yourself so that whatever you're cutting is stable. So I'm actually going to cut it in half long ways. And then I'm going to put both halves down. So now I have a flat surface to work with instead of trying to balance the cucumber. And then keeping the tip of the knife on the cutting board and using rocking motions, I'm just going to thinly slice the cucumber. So the tip of the knife is never really leaving the cutting board. Okay, I've got our slices. I'm going to do this other half. Again, just that rocking motion. Instead of having to do this, which is what you don't want, that can be dangerous to pick up the knife and can increase your risk of cutting yourself, which we don't want. So just keeping that tip of the knife on the cutting board the whole time. Okay, so we've got our cucumber slices. So we've got all of our salad ingredients actually. So now it is time to put everything in a large mixing bowl. And we've got some tongs here to mix everything up. So I've got 2 cups of greens. This is mixed spring greens, but you can also use romaine lettuce, green leaf lettuce, spinach, pretty much any green you want for the salad. And then I've got a cup of cherry or grape tomatoes. I'm gonna throw those in. I decided to cut them in half just because I like a little bit smaller pieces. I've got a 1/3 cup of sliced pepperoncini. No. Yeah, I think that's the name of them. Let me check the jar. I think pepperoncini might be the spice actually. No, they're pepperoncinis. Sorry, I got very confused for a second. Pepperoncini peppers, thinly sliced. And then we're gonna add some of those red onion slices that we sliced. And then all of those cucumbers. Great. And then we've got some more Parmesan cheese, got a 1/4 cup. If you or someone in your family has a dairy allergy, you can totally leave the cheese out or use a substitute that you or your family enjoy. Then you can see that the salad dressing did kind of separate, which is totally normal. So I'm just going to give it a little shake. Open up the jar, pour it right on top. It looks so good. Let me move my bowl so that you can see it. There we go. And then I am just going to take my tongs and just gently toss it to get the whole salad coated in the dressing. Just looks incredible. Very fresh. Lots of vegetables, lots of fiber. Always a good thing. The thing I love about salads, especially the salad, is that you can really, it's so easy to customize. You don't really have to be scared of making any sort of error because you can just substitute, you know, any vegetable that you might like or any vegetable that you have that you need to use up, or, you know, play around with the dressing ingredients. There's very few ways that you can go wrong with customizing a salad. That's pretty much it. It is all tossed. When you serve it, you can definitely top it with a little bit more Parmesan cheese. I'll tilt my camera a little bit. It looks very delicious. If anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A. Other than that, that's it for the salad. Pretty simple.
Thanks, Emily. There's actually a question for you. How long can the dressing stay in the fridge before it spoils?
Great question. I'd say with the, if you're using fresh grated Parmesan, I wouldn't say more than a few days, just because I wouldn't want that to go bad. If you are not using cheese in it, if it's just red wine vinegar and olive oil, I don't see why it couldn't sit in your fridge for a couple weeks. I'd love to hear if anyone else has any input, but the cheese is the only thing I'd be concerned with that expiring. But other than that, the base of it is vinegar and olive oil in the fridge, and I feel like that would last a couple weeks.
Yeah, I would agree with you that it definitely would last a while in the fridge just for the dressing. Obviously, we're not talking about the whole salad.
Right.
I mean, for me, like a rule of thumb is like 3 days for anything, really.
Yeah.
So I would just highly not leave it in the fridge for more than like 4 days, given still that it could last a little while longer than 4 days, just because it's going to start picking up on the scents in the fridge, and it's not going to be as fresh, and it's not going to taste as flavorful the longer it stays in there. But in terms of spoiling, yeah, I would say maybe like 5 to 7 days. But I would definitely look it up right now just to be sure.
You can always cut, and this goes for any recipe, you can always cut the recipe in half. So instead of using a 1/4 cup each of olive oil and vinegar, you can use 2 tablespoons. That's half of a 1/4 cup. So then it would just last you maybe a couple, 2 to 3 days of salads. And then you can always make another batch. And like you saw, it took no more than 2 to 3 minutes. So it would be something to quickly make in the middle of the week.
Awesome. And I just looked it up. They're talking about 3 months for like bottles of salad dressing, but ours is made fresh, so it doesn't have any preservatives in it. So I definitely would assume it's going to be the same amount of time, 3 months. That's definitely too long. But there's a way to tell if your salad dressing is bad. It says here that if it develops a smell or a flavor or appearance or mold, then definitely discarded. So again, I would just use, like 4 to 5 or tops a week, and then definitely keep an eye out for like any appearance, like funny appearance or mold or, a weird scent or smell for sure. Yeah.
Always smell your leftovers. That'll tell you a whole lot about if it's good or not.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, on a different note, usually things last, like food, like leftover foods usually last like 3 days to 4 days in the fridge.
Yep.
Great question again. So we have about like 1 more minute or so for the pizza to come out of the oven. But other than that, we have gone through all of the recipes for tonight. And again, the salad is ready to be consumed. The tiramisu will just be, a couple more hours in the fridge. The pizza will come out of the oven in a minute or so. So we're pretty much done. I'm going to stick around here until the pizza comes out of the oven, and I'm going to show it to you guys if you want to stick around and see the final product. Otherwise, we thank you so much for attending tonight and for sticking along. And for those who cooked along with us, I hope you guys have enjoyed the recipes and had some fun, and hopefully you'll like the food.
I'll take a quick moment as well while we're waiting just to thank the 3 of you, because we obviously couldn't host this without our wonderful instructors. So as always, we appreciate you so much. And thank you so much for teaching us tonight.
And Donna, yes, the recording will be available. Maybe Dakota, do you want to elaborate on that, how to access that?
Yeah, absolutely. So everyone's going to get an email probably this Friday, maybe next Monday, from us that will have the recipe packet again, and then it will have a link to our YouTube channel, which is where this cooking class will be located. If you don't get that for any reason, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm happy to send it to you. And all of our previous cooking classes from the Kendall Reagan Nutrition Center are on there as well, if you're interested. Look at those too.
And here's the final pizza for those of you who stuck around. Let me share my screen real quick. So this is what it looks like right now. The sun-dried tomatoes just got a little too brown, but they're not burned. But yeah, that's what it looks like. Very cheesy, very colorful. Smells really, really good. So yeah.
Okay, well, if we're all set, we can, there's some people in the chat who are really excited to go eat. They've been cooking along and they can't wait. So we will let everyone go. Thank you all for joining us. And we hope you have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday. Good night.
Good night. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.